next question is, I have talked to a lot of HR leaders personally who are like, I want to celebrate Black History Month, but the pushback I get from my leadership team is, well, if we celebrate that one, we have to celebrate all of them.
Is that
what
hard?
Advice? I'm literally asking you, what advice do you have? What should they say to them? Because I mean, I also would be like, lovely. We can celebrate a lot of people's perspective and lived experience. Isn't that great? But that's just me. But like, what advice do you have for HR people who are trapped and the leaders are like, we can't do it because now we have to celebrate everything?
You're never trapped, right? I was DEI team of one for a long time, and I literally built out a curriculum and a calendar for every month of the year that lived on our intranet. It was a lot of work. So maybe if you have the budget, you can get yourself like, there's a ton of people who want to get into DEI. If you could get a coordinator or somebody like that who's really good at putting these kinds of things together. But if you have an intranet and somebody willing to do the research, I'm really not sure why you wouldn't just highlight as much as you can. Because the thing I tell people is that the reason I got involved in DEI is really understanding that our education is not uniform, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of communities who are learning things in different school settings, whether it's public or private, that's really relevant to those communities, but maybe not taught in a community that doesn't have anybody there who looks like them. So people are standing on, business, and I look at like people like, the 1619 founder who's trying to actually has a dissertation in Black history and telling people facts that I only dream of being able to pull out of my head in a reasonable amount of time. And they're just like, looking at Wikipedia and being like, look what Wikipedia says. And it's like, this woman's doing her whole career in 20 years research of a specific community, but you want to fight back against it because it's your feeling versus fact, right?
Yeah. Again, back to the fact of feelings. It's interesting. Like, I actually think if I'm trying to remember the beginning of our friendship, it was because last Juneteenth, you were featured in an article. And I think I reposted it and commented on how I never learned anything about that growing up. And I don't think I grew up in the South. Like, I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which, I mean, some people still flew Confederate flags. And I go back and I'm just like, gross, please stop. Right. Like, I don't love it. I don't love it. Right. So I think it's very interesting because there's a lot of things that we don't learn growing up. And even then we're so young that we haven't really learned the critical thinking skills to be able to ask our teachers, well, what did Black people experience during this time? And was the Civil War really fought on? What was it really fought on? Like, how did people really feel about slavery? And to get real answers from your teachers, you're just taught what's in the textbooks. And then you end up with this lived experience as an adult, and you don't have exposure sometimes to multiple communities.
You do not. And I'm super grateful for growing up in Detroit, Michigan, where it is predominantly Black. And my teachers were like, whenever people post like, who name your first like Black teacher? And I'm like, kindergarten. Like, I don't have a memory of, I think I probably could count on one hand how many white teachers I had. And now that's not to say like one's better than the other, but what I'd like to say is we saw what was achievable, right? We were seeing people who look like us teach us, which is really powerful in that moment, right? And having a mixture actually of those teachers, because, I had white teachers who poured into me too, but like the very idea that we're talking about things that matter in the community because those teachers belong to that community was really powerful for me. And I understand that that is not a norm. So when I go out into the world and I talk to people, I go, oh, you actually have a gap of information, right? Because this wasn't really taught to you. And I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and try to fill the gap of education so that our goal is basically for us to have a good conversation as coworkers, as collaborators, so that you're not saying anything out of turn that sounds, a little beyond wackadoodle to me about my community, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not pissed off, right? I'm not going like, I have to explain to you why you can't touch my hair. Like, you should know why that is, like.
I would sock someone for touching my hair at this point of my life. I'd be like, what are you doing?
What's that food that you're eating? Oh, I know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's
why
a way.
Are you celebrating that holiday? Yeah.
Exactly. There's a way for us to be able to actually use education so that we are minimizing risk within the workplace. That's the point. Like, that's what we're doing. And it sucks that it falls on HR and DEI leaders and whatever. It does, right? It absolutely. I wish people had a viable resource where they could go out, like, because what's interesting to me is I actually said like last year something like, well, Google is free. And then all these little youngins came back to me and they were like, but there's so much misinformation out there.
Yeah.
Google. And I was like, you know what? That is true because I'm old and I came around at the time of the internet being created. So the misinformation was minimal because we didn't have a lot of, people in somebody's basement just purposely sabotaging information. So sure. So what's my mission? Yeah. My passion is education. I will share it with you.
I love that. Okay, listen, I think it takes like one time to put everything together and then you're just updating it every year. And there are a lot of HR communities that would be like happy to help an HR person who's balancing this. Yep. But I think if your company truly cares about inclusion, you can't ignore the fact that these months are happening. And I think it just makes someone feel even more alienated.
But I think I'm probably gonna get a lot of shit for this. There's a lot of HR leaders who actually are the gatekeepers of this information.